2025 Early Connections Conference, Expression, presented by the Van Sloan Foundation. Early Connections Conference logo. Senses and Sounds, Phonological Awareness Activities for Families.
Welcome to Senses and Sounds, Phonological Awareness Activities for Families. I'm Ellen Barber, and
Hi, I'm Kate LeBlanc.
I got it. We'll get the tech stuff down. Okay, the structure for our presentation today, we're going to start with talking about phonological awareness, reading, and structured literacy, go into components of phonological awareness, and finally do some activities. And hopefully it's fun throughout, but we did make sure to have it at the end.
Okay, so to begin this conversation, we do hope that it's a conversation with all of you. I know lots of people in here are both family members as well as practitioners within many related fields to visual impairment, and we're so glad that you're all here. For ourselves, Ella and I both have common professional background experiences. For myself, I am a TVI, a teacher of students with visual impairment. I have a background in elementary education as well as special education at all levels. And I also happen to be the parent of children who are experiencing special education too. So I view it from that lens as well, particularly when we think about reading. And Ellen and I are both, I think we can safely say we are both passionate about literacy. You'll probably hear that in our voice, especially as time goes on within this presentation. But we found this shared sort of passion through our work together here at Perkins.
And I'm Ellen Barber. I previously was a special education teacher, and I'm now a speech-language pathologist. I worked at in the secondary program at Perkins School for the Blind, and now work at a clinic in Lexington. And as Kate was saying, we have shared common backgrounds. We figured out that we both loved literacy on a walk out of the Howe building over to the parking lot back here, and that's what kind of sparked all of this. So we're really excited to be here and chatting with all of you. On the screen, well, previously on the screen there were two pictures of Kate and I just smiling. Sorry, 1 second. I can get going while we're waiting for the slides to come up. Kate and I like to start just by framing our conversation and some of our personal beliefs around education and in teaching to give you that lens as we're going through all the information today. So we'd like to start, I can click on it. Perfect. So the first is every child can learn and is unique. The second, visual impairment is a spectrum, and reading challenges can be considered on a spectrum too. Intervention and early intervention is critical. A growth mindset is super important. We're all learners, including ourselves here as professionals too. Knowledge is power and fuels advocacy. You might be an expert in this topic. This might be your first time ever hearing about it. So take what makes the most sense for you today. Know that we're here to answer any questions, but don't feel like you need to take it all if this is your first introduction. Recognize trustworthy resources and know that as parents, you're the primary experts on your child. We're here to provide our professional insight, but you as the parent are that expert.
Okay, so why did we choose this topic of phonological awareness? Well, one of the main reasons is because it's quite necessary for learning and using the alphabetic code. This is one of those precursor kind of sub-skills that's very, very important, especially in that birth to 7-year range for certain, for both typically developing learners as well as, and especially I would argue, for our students with visual impairment. There's lots of implications for subsequent reading and writing, Braille literacy pieces to this. And so we really want to make sure that our students have a strong introduction and practice with phonological awareness. Researchers have found that the sub-skill of phonological awareness in particular really predicts later outcomes. So we want to make sure that our students are getting the very best access to this particular skill. Researchers have also found that the majority of poor readers are ones that really struggle in this area. So we want to make sure that we can strengthen it, especially early on, as we talked about early intervention. Instruction in this area, direct instruction, specific, explicit instruction is really, really critical for novice readers and spellers. and it supports vocabulary and word awareness. A lot of this information comes from Dr. Louisa Moats, who is a huge researcher in the area of literacy, as well as Carol Tolman. And the website Reading Rockets is one that we certainly recommend because there's a lot of digestible information, lots of information, but a lot of digestible information about literacy. So again, why phonological awareness for students with visual impairment? Well, many of our learners have an auditory strength or access things auditorily. And so phonological awareness is primarily an auditory skill. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have associated print or braille or tactile experiences with phonological awareness, because those can certainly support learning and engagement as well. But it is primarily a phonological auditory-based skill. And again, it predicts later outcomes for students. Even at these super young ages, we're thinking about transition. We're thinking about life beyond education and what does adult life look like. And for the best outcomes for our students, we really want to get strong literacy skills into them. Whoops, sorry. It also develops sensitivity to sounds within language and literacy. And as we mentioned, like all students benefit from explicit instruction in reading, but these 5 pillars of reading came from the National Reading Panel, which was some research that was done. And there has been subsequent research in Braille and in students, particularly with visual impairments, since that time. And a quote from a research that had to do specifically with visual impairment and phonological awareness was that the development of phonological awareness in children who are blind or have low vision is similar to that of children who are sighted. So again, all the more reason that this is a critical skill for our learners. And again, because our students don't have that incidental access to things that they might see visually, or their peers or sighted peers may see visually on a wall in a kindergarten classroom or in a pre-K classroom, you know, it's really important that we're very explicit, direct, and providing some experiences and applications for this subskill.
To build off of that, the explicit teaching of reading is essential for everyone. Another Reading Rockets quote is up on the screen alongside a picture of a human brain, and it says, Kate's daughter's brain. Human brains are naturally wired to speak. They are not naturally wired to read and write. And I would adapt this as a speech and language pathologist to say human brains are naturally wired to communicate. Well, that might not be verbal language, and that's totally okay. We are all born with this innate ability to communicate with each other. However, reading and writing is not the same. That needs to be explicitly taught. And I frame this in, if you were to be introduced to a totally different alphabet that you've never seen before, you would really need that explicit instruction to understand how that system works and to then read from there. We have a very, Scarborough's reading rope is a model to explain reading, and it's very complicated. I'll go through it pretty quickly. But on the right-hand side of the screen, there are 2 pieces of a rope that are intertwined. And as it moves to the left side of the screen, the ropes slowly become more and more intertwined to make one cohesive rope. At the top side, there are the skills required for language comprehension, which include background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. The bottom portion of the rope has the word recognition skills outlined as phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. And as all of these skills come together, that's what support us become skilled and fluent readers. Now, we don't put this up here to overwhelm you or make you feel nervous about reading, but do really want to let you know that reading is a super complex process that takes a lot of skills intertwined together to make us become really skilled readers. It's also awesome that we have this knowledge of all these skills, because when we're looking at and assessing reading skills in general, we can kind of see where those breakdowns are if they are happening and really hone in on those specific skills.
So a term that's drawn some notoriety more lately is science of reading and structured literacy. And we want to just briefly go through some overarching characteristics of structured literacy, just so you have an idea as to where phonological awareness falls within these. So structured literacy is something that's evidence-based. It's, again, that explicit direct instruction. It's systematic and cumulative. It builds upon skills. So phonological awareness is one of the earliest skills. So this is why we are honing in on that today. And structured literacy also uses ongoing assessment, data-driven decision-making. So practitioners are really looking at those sub-skills, just like Ellen was just mentioning, and pinpointing where does a student need some intervention, where does a student need some support, and where do students need accommodations or modifications in particular. One of the more fun pieces of structured literacy is the characteristic of multisensory engagement. On the screen, we have several pictures that have to do with different ways that we can engage our learners and get them thinking about the sound component of words, which for many of us in the room, I know I'm speaking for myself, that focusing on sounds wasn't necessarily the focus of my reading instruction as a 4, 5, 6-year-old. So this is a really great way to engage all learners. So whether it's something like tracing letters in sand while we're listening to the auditory component of it, whether we're using a poppet, a sensory toy, but thinking about how that one-to-one correspondence is happening with each individual sound, whether we're using Play-Doh and doing the same thing, pressing into it for each individual sound, whether we're using a story box, which uses lots of different components to talk about literacy, whether it's the book itself in adapted forms, whether it's tactile, real objects, like for this one is if you give a pig a pancake and there's a pancake mix box, there's syrup, and there's also not tactile symbols, but you could have tactile symbols, but 2D symbols in high contrast that might support a student's understanding of specific vocabulary. And so there's also a hands clapping. And so that's a really accessible, no items needed kind of way to engage students who are thinking about sounds. We're going to talk about more specifics in this area, but I'm going to turn to Ellen, who is an expert in complex communicators.
So let's talk about literacy and complex communicators. And when I'm using that term complex communicators, I'm talking about individuals who use strategies or different systems to communicate outside of verbal speech. That could be something like a high-tech AAC device, like a tablet or an iPad, real objects, gestures. There's a whole plethora of them. And what I want to really emphasize is that non or minimally speaking does not mean non-reading. There are alternate ways, and it's on that individual's school-based team or community-based team to accommodate that literacy instruction to meet that individual's communication profile to provide them access to that literacy instruction. I could talk about this all day. I'll be brief, I promise. So use of tangible symbols is a huge one. I have a picture of 2 tangible symbols on the top. One is a granola bar on a white background, and the other is a mini story to represent book. You can also use high-tech AAC devices, which are those tablet-based or iPad-based systems to support with that have that voice output feature. And then use of recognition tasks could be modified with real objects. It could be modified with tangible symbols or gestures. Many ways to access that. And on the bottom, there's a image of a mid-tech, which is 2 buttons that have presumably pre-recorded messages on them to support with either yes, no, or a phrase, so that individual can still access that communication side of the literacy instruction. Now, literacy instruction in general increases all of our independence to access our world around us, right? It's even more essential for individuals who are more complex communicators to have this literacy instruction because it increases their independence for expressive communication. If we're able to provide this literacy instruction, many of our AAC systems are ones that are preset vocabulary pages. They might be real objects that we're presenting to those individuals, and that's really reliant on an external person to support them with. However, if we're providing that literacy instruction, we can introduce keyboards or modified keyboards to support with spelling-based communication to generate novel words and phrases, and again, increases that independent expression. Additionally, a lot of those higher tech systems, so those iPad-based systems or tablet-based systems, now have a search function on them. So similar to when we're looking at our phones or we're navigating an iPad, Not everything is on that front page. There's that navigational component to finding what it is that you're looking for. If you're able to access that search function on an AAC device, not all your vocabulary is on that first page, right? You can go in, you can use that search function. You can know if you're looking for apple, you know apple begins with an A, maybe AP. Find that word a little bit more efficiently and increase that efficient communication to reduce some of that navigational side of it. Finally, just want to make a note about individuals who might be using vocalizations or verbal approximations. Those are still ways of participating in literacy instruction. And while they might not be saying that target sound or those target words exactly how we might expect them, they're still participating, and affirming that is super essential in the literacy instruction process too.
Okay, so now that we've sort of thought about the far reaches of literacy instruction and thinking about where phonology fits in that, we're going to jump right into phonology. One of the ways that is helpful to think about this subtopic is as an umbrella, because there are subtopics within it. So the phonology umbrella includes things such as the word level areas, like rhyming or alliteration or sentence segmentation. We're going to practice all of these. I hope you guys are ready. Syllable level, that could be like 2 syllables or more, thinking about those word parts. And then the onset and rhyme level, we're kind of going a little deeper into these the complexity of skills and thinking about the initial skill or the initial sound, excuse me, and how it's separated from the rest of the sounds in the word. And then we're getting to the most complex skill of them all, which is phonemic awareness. So all this awareness, we've got phonological awareness, we've got phonemic awareness. Phonemes are just the smallest sounds within a word. So for most cases, it's an individual letter or a group of letters. And so, for instance, the word moon has 3 phonemes. Ooh, n. Again, get your voices ready. If you've got a active voice, we want to hear it. And so, again, that's the most advanced skill of phonological awareness. We affirm that people who are learning language and learning literacy at all levels are entering this sort of umbrella at all levels and are accessing it and are using scaffolds. Wherever your child, wherever your student is on this umbrella is a fine place to be and a fine place to start. We just want to acknowledge that. Okay, here we go. So when we think about the word level, which is that first of the 4 sort of pieces of that umbrella, one of the skills is alliteration. We're thinking about that first sound in each word. So for instance, if we said, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, which you may have heard in childhood, all of those letters or all those initial letters are the same. So this could be, for other students, this might be, you know, using 2 different words, familiar words to kids like mom and me, dad and the dog, bath and bubbles. This also might be introduced through things like tongue twisters or silly sentences. The sillier the better, I say, for engagements purposes. So Danny's dog dances down the dirt drive. Now, I think starting with the child's familiar, preferred interest areas is the key to getting engagement. So if we think about the child's pet's name, if we think about their best friend, if we think about their lovey, their stuffed animal's name, you know, things like that, and starting from there where it's comfortable and it's interesting to the student or child, that's really important. So you can do things like say this to a student or child, you can repeat it or have them repeat it. You can use motions with the common sounds. So whether you're tapping, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, tapping on your hand, moving your foot, stomping, anything that supports that, again, multisensory engagement, body engagement too. All right, moving sort of up that spectrum, we're thinking about sentences. This is a great skill as we're thinking about, you know, students that are 2, 3, 4, 5, and thinking about sort of those preschool, like formal preschool, but also preschool kind of skills where they're going to be exposed to language within phrases and sentences. So not just a single word. So this is like recognizing that words are made up of larger units of sentences. And so thinking about how we're kind of separating those parts Like, what are the parts in a sentence? And I'm not talking about noun, verb, anything like that. That's from higher levels. I'm thinking about how many words. So for instance, if I say I am 4 years old, how many words is in there? Oh, I saw a lot of hands up there. 5. Excellent. So you just segmented a sentence. You just figured out how many words are in there. Now, this may not look like that for a child. We may not like drill and say like how many words are in a sentence. We might, but it may be just like, oh wait, there's if we say I am 4, I am 4. Or noticing that students are pausing in between these words, and there's that recognition. It's important for us as parents and as educators to recognize as the children are recognizing these sort of phonology kind of skills. You could do things like clapping the words in a sentence. You could step or move yourself or an object, a stuffed animal, a little token, anything forward with each word. You could also repeat it in a pyramid. As kids get older and they might be working on fluency pyramids and practicing saying sentences repeatedly, they might say, I am 4, I am 4 years, and keep going like that. That's kind of fun sometimes. All right, again, we're moving up the scale here. So syllables, when we're thinking about syllables, those are those word parts within a word. And so it's one word part. That's a small group of sounds in a word that includes one vowel sound. That was like eye-opening to me as a teacher and educator, actually. I went back to school recently to become a reading specialist because I felt like I needed more background knowledge. Not only am I interested in this topic, but I also wanted more background knowledge so I could really be as direct and explicit as I could be with students. And so thinking about this, it's one vowel sound in a syllable, and it's sometimes considered a beat of sound, and it's sometimes called like one push of breath that you're sort of offering as you say a syllable. So if I said banana, how many syllables is in banana? 3, yes. And so all of you who just like immediately said 3, sorry, your brain, I'm thinking about your brain automatically knew that. You knew that whether you looked visually at this and you saw that the visual of the banana is cut up into 3 parts, which is kind of fun to do, and to think about physically the separation of these syllables. Or maybe you said it in your brain or you repeated it to yourself after I said it to figure it out. There's other ways you can do it. Again, you can tap it out, you can clap it out, stomp it out. You can also chin drop, banana. There's 3 chin drops that just happen when I touch my chin to my hand. And so that's 3 syllables. You could touch the object 3 times for that. You could even strike a musical instrument for each syllable. I'm going to look towards my music therapist friends over here and think about how they incorporate, I know so naturally, they incorporate these sort of literacy skills. You can also show the number of syllables and positions of sounds with blocks or just with manipulatives, anything that you can move. Moving on, we're getting a little more complex. Now we're thinking about blending syllables. So taking those big word parts and blending them together. So the less complex spectrum of this particular sub skill is that compound words level, where we're thinking about things like backpack. I have 2 pictures up here. I've got a colorful backpack, and then I have Dora Explorer's backpack, because if you ever heard that song, backpack, backpack, she's naturally combining those words and segmenting those sounds too, those syllables. But that's a way that students can and children can use familiar things. They're grabbing their backpack, or you're packing their backpack as you're going to school or to daycare or to a program. Bathtub, that's another one. Toothpaste, bedtime, all of these familiar sort of universal words that are compound words or 2 smaller words within one can help kids think about blending syllables. Also, the more complex piece of that is one single word that isn't made up of 2 smaller words. So things like bubble, lovey, stuffy, mommy, teacher, where we do have those word parts, but it's not 2 separate words. So things like objects or names are really helpful and can bring meaning to this particular skill. Again, you can like touch the item. There's the teddy, touch it twice. Or you can I like this one, have children fill in and blend syllables. So I might say to my child, like, do you have your bag? And then wait for them to fill in pack, and then maybe be like, oh, wait, what's that? What did I forget? Your toothbrush? No, my backpack. Like, have them blend it. All right, so we just added together and blended those syllables. Now we're going to delete those syllables. We're going to take something off. So you're taking away a syllable and naming what's left. And so again, it could be less complex if we're using these compound words, these two words put together, like snowflake. So like snowflake, snow or flake. But it also could be more complex with multi-syllable words. On the screen, we've got a watermelon here. And so say watermelon without saying un. Watermelon. Okay, excellent. So you just deleted a syllable. You could do things like say baseball without ball. That's at the compound word level. You could say wiggle without ghoul. And I kind of heard there was a pause, right? You had to think about it for just a second. So this piece doesn't always come naturally to people, but it really is an important skill to think about these word parts and have students develop this sensitivity to different portions of words. It'll really bode well for future reading and future spelling. And then we think about onset and rhyme. Okay. Just double checking. Okay, so when we think about onset and rhyme, we're thinking about the onset, which is the first sound in a word. We're thinking about, for instance, if we had the word pan, it's the p and pan, and the rhyme is anything that comes after. When we think about students who do have some usable vision or low vision, things like large print, high contrast, low clutter variations are wonderful, especially for our students with CVI. I think about highlighting things. I think about a child looking for their name on a locker or some sort of belonging, a lunchbox, and thinking about, oh, can I highlight like the K in Kate so that the student recognizes that piece? I might even say to them, can you find the the sound piece rather than just the letter? Maybe we're describing the features of the letter. Oh, this is a really tall letter. This is a small letter. This is a fall letter. It's falling below the line. And we might use tactile support, things like wiki sticks around letters or on top of letters, in between the two parts. Certainly, there's lots of implications for Braille use also. Love plastic Braille stickers and adding that to these pieces as well. So rhyme was spelled R-I-M-E when we're thinking about onset rhyme, but it does have to do with the traditional rhyme, like words that sound alike, because words rhyme when they have the same rhyme, R-I-M-E, believe it or not. So this supports future application of decoding and spelling skills. If you've ever thought of like how sometimes we learn words and we're thinking about word families that all kind of sound alike, but might have a different sound for the beginning word, rhyme, time, lime, things like that. This can really support their sensitivity and their acknowledgement of the familiar parts. You could use it with highly familiar words like names. I think starting with the name is really important, or familiar names to kids. And you could also do things like, hey, we're in the kitchen. What are all the words or all the things in our kitchen that start with P or P? Pear, pan, pancake, things like that. Or which ones all sound like ache? Oh, there's cake and there's bake and there's make. And there's a book, a picture of a book up here that's Jake Bakes Cakes. Children's books do a great job of thinking about rhyme and rhyme scheme. And so there's lots of examples of those. Sheep and a Jeep is another one. That's a classic. And so thinking about what word parts are the same, or down by the bay, do you ever see a pig wearing a wig? Having students and children think about that, whether you're noticing, hey, I noticed you were like, did you ever see a pig wearing a wig? And you're like, I noticed that you were rocking when you heard that sound that ended with ig. That's interesting. It's really drawing their attention to it. Also alliteration, again, going back to that earlier skill, things that sound alike, that would be that onset.
So bringing it back to some of our complex communicators and how we can build those skills within individuals who are using different strategies outside of verbal language to communicate. So in particular with onset rhyme, depending on their visual access, I have two examples up here of real images on high contrast backgrounds. If an individual has CVI and can recognize these images, you could present them with these two and say, oh, which one has the f sound? Ask them to point. You can also do this with real objects, like which one has the at sound. Hopefully you're not bringing a real rat anywhere, but you could get a stuffed rat and support with that side of the real images too. With this too, I just want to make a quick note about vocabulary. This isn't a time to introduce new vocabulary to that individual. It would be a known object a known vocabulary term within their current vocabulary repertoire. So you're not kind of doing two skills at once. You're really building upon their current strength in whatever vocabulary is in their current repertoire. Sorry. No, you're good. So let's dive into phonemes. This is the most complex of the skills. And as Kate mentioned earlier, a phoneme is the smallest unit of sound that we can combine to create words. So on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a smiling man that says there are 44 phonemes. So there are 44 phonemes in... Sorry.
He's very popular in the early development here.
So he's sharing the 44 phonemes. And I'm going to put you all to the test again. So we're going to start with cat. How many phonemes are in cat? At. Nice. Okay. How many phonemes are in phone? Oh, you got it. Nice. So what gets tricky about this is spelling and those letter representations don't always align with the phoneme amount. Again, we're really thinking about those sounds and breaking down those words into sounds. And I want to make a note too about articulation because this is a really sound-based practice. So articulation has a developmental timeline. Sounds are developed earlier. Sounds are typically, this is how we think about it, at the front of our mouth. Those sounds are produced first, and then as we continue to kind of grow and develop for typical development, the sounds towards the back of our mouth, like k and g, those are the harder ones to produce, and that takes some more time to produce, to develop. So when we're doing these skills, again, recognizing that we're also affirming any approximation to as an individual is engaging in these activities. Important to know that we want to clip sounds that we might say p instead of p. So we want to make sure we're really emphasizing the p. And you can clap, you can tap, you can do whatever to make sure that or that vowel sound after isn't included in that, because that would be two phonemes instead of one. I talked a little bit about the articulation errors, but there's also outside of the norm of typical development, we have physical differences of individuals might influence how those sounds come out, and that's totally okay, right? We want to still affirm how those sounds are coming out and not kind of tie it to maybe a reading difficulty, but know who that person is, who your child is, who your student is, to understand that that's their way of producing that specific sound. We can use alternate forms, like I said, those AAC methods. For an individual's educational team or you as a parent, it might take a little bit more of a proactive setup to support with that, but giving different opportunities for that individual to produce that sound. And then last but not least, some sounds are easier than others. So those continuous sounds like s is harder to say versus stop sounds, which is b or m. And then there are voiced and unvoiced sounds. Your voiced ones are if you put your hands here, you can feel your vocal folds coming together. I won't get too speech nerdy. And then those unvoiced ones are the ones where they don't require your vocal folds to come together. So those ones are a little bit easier to produce. All right, so we will practice some sound blending because this is our next skill that we're thinking of. So sound blending is the ability to listen to the individual phonemes and then combine them together. So we have b, at on the board, which would blend together to make beautiful. All right. We can do, if you're practicing these skills at home, right? We can say things like, do you have your k up? And then you're supporting them to hear those sounds, blend them together, and tie it to that function, that personally relevant thing that they're going to get. Same with whereas your b, ag, and it's using that that skill, you're pushing them to do that within their functional day-to-day, and then tying it to typically a tangible.
The car is like the best place to do this. I gotta be honest. When you've got time to kill and you're like, hey, what about, do you know what this word is? And, you know, just use a CBC, a quick three-letter word like that, thinking about that. Yeah, recently my kid's teacher said, she's really good with like blending those sounds, like, because we had a lot of car rides where it was either crying or we were practicing like some sort of like, you know, game I was making into a game.
Kate's so fun. Again, you can use real objects to support individuals who might be communicating in a different way, thinking about their communication profile and how they're accessing language and how they're accessing communication. You can use sign language, you can use their form of AAC, real objects, and again, always encouraging the verbal approximation. So on the board here, I have two pictures of one of a cup and one of a real fork. Those can be high contrast images if that individual might have CVI and that's supportive for their visual access. Could be real objects that they know, they're not new objects that they're exploring for the first time, but to kind of support with that practice too.
Now we're getting into the most complex skill. For most students, we are not starting at this part of the juncture at all. But for phoneme manipulation, that's where we're changing things. We're changing things up. We're thinking about those individual sounds and can we substitute them, which is again the highest skill, or can we delete them or add them or segment them or blend them? So it's similar skills to what we might do with things like, syllables, but we're thinking about with individual letter sounds. And so this skill, while it's super complex, it is also really important. And again, they find that this particular skill in research really supports sounding out words, being sensitive to changes in language and changes in encoding, the spelling piece of things. And so this generally is introduced to learners in isolation and these like specific discrete kind of tasks, starting with the blending, segmenting, then going on to addition, deletion, and substitution. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. And so when we're thinking about these particular skills, let's try it. Say the word art. Now say art with a k sound. Nice, because you just did addition of a phoneme to a word. Now if you say block, can you say block without the O? You got it. A little more complex, as you can see. And say tap. Now say tap, but instead of t, say mm. You got it. So you are manipulating all of these phonemes. This is going to bode well in your brain automatically as you're thinking about how to write, how to read. And again, I suggest trying it with familiar words, starting with what's comfortable and familiar to a child, to a student, and thinking about how you can change that. I always think about like, a name of a teacher or a name of a child or a sibling or something like that and be like, wow, what if her name was different? Let's try it and changing it in that way. You can always play with words as they come up in songs, stories, or shows. We know our kids have like real big preferences in terms of different sounds or repetitive speech, repetitive words. And so play with it and see how flexible we can get with that as well. All right, we love our multisensory tools, don't we?
So there are lots of tangible objects that you can bring in to support with this too. And I'll talk about a few examples that we have on the screen. My favorite are these tap lights. So if an individual, we have three, you can press the lights as you're sounding out, or you're practicing syllable manipulation or phoneme level manipulation, counting out syllables, words and sentences. You can tap out those lights to turn them on as you're practicing with those various different skills. Next to that on the left side, sorry, my left side right side is horrible, are building blocks that you can put together. Similar idea as you're counting things out or manipulating words or syllables or sounds. You can put them together, break them apart. Poppets are great to also use this skill too. We have some on the bottom, there's some, what are these? I don't even know what these are called, but little sliding discs, manipulatives. Bingo chips, there we go.
I think the play ones are great. I think when we think about kids with OT issues and we think about large hand movements versus small ones, sometimes the tapping, like a lot of like traditional sort of educational reading interventions will be like, oh, tap it, which is not working for some kids. And I just want to affirm that like sometimes like more of a larger motion of moving something is really good. I use wooden blocks. I use these for kids that can access it. You can use like beads on a string, which is great because you can limit the amount of phonemes or syllables in that particularly. And then Hot Wheels are great for thinking about blending. Can we blend those words together? Just like a car, drives on the highway. We can do it slow. You could do it fast. You could have a child like have their hands on top of it while you're moving it. So many different options. And all of these really work with both auditory, print, and braille sort of access areas. Okay, so even with our youngest learners, we're always thinking about the future. We're always thinking about what comes next, not to overwhelm you, but we are thinking about that because now is always the time, right? Thank you. Regardless, now is always the time. And so we found 3 quotes that really spoke to us in terms of thinking about transition, even for our youngest learners. The first being, phonological awareness activities are great for younger learners as they are starting to learn about sounds in bigger units of language. The second one says that phonological and phonemic awareness, so again, those larger skills versus those smaller skills, is the foundation upon which all the other layers of literacy are built. And the last one, which is visual impairment specific, is by taking a proactive approach to enhancing phonological awareness during the preschool years, educators and families can better prepare children with visual impairments for future reading, writing, and spelling. So I think before we go into the Q&A, we just want to really thank you. We appreciate all that you do as families and as practitioners that are supporting students with visual impairments and their literacy skills. And so right now we will take some in-person audience questions first, and then we'll take some questions from the Zoom audience. If you're attending in person, you can raise your hand and we'll bring the microphone to you. If you're attending virtually, you can enter your question into the Q&A box. And if we don't have time to answer all the questions, we're happy, trust me, Ellen and I are very happy to follow up with you on this very important topic. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This was an excellent presentation. I was wondering if you do presentations to IEP meetings. Yeah, to give educational information to our speech pathologists.
It is definitely a passion of ours for sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we can absolutely talk offline. But I think this is really important for school teams to know. So I do work here on campus and off campus, and I think I'm dealing with a lot of different districts personally and professionally, and I really feel that this is an incredibly important piece to follow up on for all learners. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
With that in mind, I just want to bring us back to that growth mindset and knowledge is power piece too, because I think especially for more of our complex communicators, it's not as present, at least for me as a speech pathologist. It wasn't something that I learned in my graduate program. It wasn't something that was included, like the literacy side was and the complex communication side was, but it wasn't something that was super integrated. And so, like we said, knowledge is power. We're all in that growth mindset, and providing this information, would love to share with as many places as possible. And like we said, knowledge is power. So as much as we can share it,
Yeah,
would love to.
Thank you, Ellen. Just real quick.
Yeah,
sorry,
that's okay.
I'll pass the microphone. Our IEP, our speech pathologist is excellent, and we have a private speech pathologist as well. My son is a complex communicator. He uses DeSalt, American Sign Language, visual. And then he also has his own way of trying to communicate.
He sounds amazing.
He's
That's incredible.
An excellent person, and he's a person living with an intellectual difficulty. And he is a person living with Williams syndrome. So I really appreciate this. Our speech pathologist is excellent. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Pathologist and our private speech pathologist is excellent as well. It's just that our son is a complex communicator.
Yeah.
And the one thing that you were talking about with the AAC is something that we really need. And we have been going back and forth with talking with other speech pathologists that are outside both. So both our speech pathologists talk to each other.
Amazing.
And then they've been looking for outside resources.
Okay. Oh yeah, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'll share the email after too.
That's the over here.
It was a growth mindset moment for me too. That's why I share that piece. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. I am here as a parent. I have a son who is non-speaking ASD and is also recently diagnosed with CVI. And so I kind of feel unveiled essentially, like realizing how hard it might be for him to access, education and communication. I was wondering if there were any apps, CVI apps that you might recommend that might help with his phonics that maybe we could do at home outside of school.
That's a great question. Do you know any off the top of your head?
top of my head, I'm thinking of like attributes of the apps, right? Like,
Yeah.
thinking about, like,
I'm just trying to get him to spell and type and see what he's capable of. I think that it just experimenting with what might trigger him or motivate him, because he does, you know, he will communicate only when motivated, and it's hard to find that piece. And so I'm just trying to figure out ways that might kind of spark his interest.
Outside of apps, maybe preferred toys or preferred objects in the home could be a way to kind of start with maybe that real object level, to support him in kind of navigating what he already knows and what he's comfortable with, and kind of tying some of these skills that we talked about today with that sound practice to introduce him to what that is too. I wish I had an answer about the apps, but similar to Kate, I was kind of thinking about more so what some components of apps can do, and I think I personally, in my experience, have found that those real objects, those personally relevant objects, especially if there's so much else going on sensory-wise in our world, we're going to make the most meaning and going to be able to learn the most from the things that are familiar and comfortable in our own world. So you could start there and then kind of build off of that.
I'm just thinking from a visual perspective as well, thinking about recognition and thinking about what is personally not only relevant, but that he can access visually too, and thinking about those preferred things. But I'm going to consult with my colleagues too, because I have some far more professionally developed colleagues that we can absolutely sort of dovetail these two pieces into. And I'll
Thank
get
you.
back to you. Thank you so much.
On that note, there's a website, CVI Books, literally, I think it's cvibooks.com, that has resources for a lot of books, that you can access through the internet. I was wondering if you had any resources for clipping, because I know I have a problem with it. And when I'm teaching my kids, I notice how much I'm doing it. And so is there something like online easy where I can listen and practice that?
I'm gonna be honest, I also did too, as I was doing my Orton Gillingham mentorship and thinking about, wow, gosh, this is different for me as well. You know, thinking about the physical act, I'd be like, oh, I gotta clip it. And I would do that for the student, but I'm like, I'm actually doing this for myself also. So I'm thinking about, you know, not pub. Yeah, I actually have been focusing more on and delving into the speech world a little bit, but thinking about like mouth motions and thinking about, okay, this is the shape of my mouth. This is using real pictures of like mouth motions and really sort of tying it into that, anchoring it with that piece, thinking of describing how our mouth is opening or slightly opening or closed or blocked by air, like all these different sort of attributes of these particular sounds, which again is like way you know, down the road in terms of what we're doing, but thinking about that piece, about the actual speech piece of it, and focusing on that and sort of like fine tuning, I guess, like how we're saying these sounds. I have auditory processing challenges, so it can be really hard for me to even hear in another person sometimes, like that piece of it. But thinking about like, oh yeah, wait, I remember that mouth, yeah, it was slightly open. It was like a half smile, like when I'm saying the E, like thinking like that, you know, and thinking about, you know, we didn't get too deep into it and just brief overview, but thinking about like those continuous sounds, those stop sounds, like all those different attributes, I felt like I sort of was relearning. And so that piece was really good. You know, in terms of endorsement, I love like Hands to Mind is a great company that's got like hands-on materials. I love it. You know, I don't want people to buy things that they don't necessarily need, but I love, they've got a mirror that's got a flip book with like pictures. It's high contrast. It's got actual mouths, and it's not like kid or adult mouths. That's why I liked it. It was just a mouth. It's not, it's hand, I believe it's Hand to Mind or Hand to Minds or something like that.
Right.
And they've got a really nice, like, it's like a little plastic mirror. And then if a student has vision, they can see their mouth, they can practice it. But even you as a person can like look at it and you're like, oh yeah, that's what we're supposed to be doing. Let's focus on this piece of it. So it was a little bit of like relearning.
Thank you.
One additional piece of that too, puppets are amazing. Using a puppet to have an individual explore that tactily, preferably one with a tongue in it too, but they can be hard to find. But you can actually show like the opening and the closing. Have your child, your student kind of explore their own mouth as they're making sounds, so they can even just use their own body to really kind of feel where their lips are going. It's one of those like almost a mindfulness strategy when you think about how all of your articulators move inside your mouth. It's a really coordinated dance that it does that takes way more than we like are really thinking about in our day-to-day. So bringing that extra tactile component to it, whether it be them touching their own mouth to feel the difference or using a puppet to kind of show or model that too if they're having a difficulty with some of that placement.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. This was awesome. I wanted to ask if you could speak a little bit about ways to teach AAC users that don't rely so heavily on like quizzing. Because my daughter will answer one or two touch the blank type questions, and then she's just like, and this is boring, I'm done.
I would say as much as you can enter her world. And I know that like that quizzing piece of it, but I think there's so much power in play-based therapy. And I think especially like the developmental kind of, if we're thinking about all kids, right? What they're doing until they're like, hopefully 10 to 15 is they're playing, right? And they're still engaging in those play-based activities. And so I think you can model that within whatever play, play could mean anything to anyone, right? We might still be learning how to play with things, but we're using our preferred toy to kind of interact with it. And you can use that to model a lot of those sounds and a lot of that manipulation around it too. You can also, and you said she's an AAC user.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's also that song and dance too, I think, of we're introducing and we're learning the vocabulary, we're learning the navigational components of what an AAC device is. And also we need to we're learning that support of functionally using it. So I think there's a lot of power in just kind of letting an individual play around with their own vocabulary. It might not be super functional, but letting them kind of engage with that and use it outside of that kind of drill-based learning, and there's a time and a space for some of that more, I hate that, but like that more like we need to introduce this and learn it. But with that, there can be that accidental learning when we're just kind of moving around and finding that vocabulary term. And then as that person's communication partner, we can build meaning around what that vocabulary term is. So if you're playing with or in mealtime, right? You're using forks and knives and plates, you're eating a hamburger, whatever it is. We can model that language on the AAC device. And if they start talking about their toy bear and they're pressing toy bear, toy bear, toy bear, bringing that to them, showing them that, building that kind of concrete knowledge of what it is they're communicating about, that might not be as drill based. I definitely went on a tangent about that. And we feel I didn't specifically answer the question too much, but I think thinking of that developmental period of where your child is at, I don't think a lot of kids under like 7 have the ability to kind of really sit and engage within that drill-based learning. And so finding those opportunities to do that within their play will be an awesome way to do that.
It's on my mind because my daughter's IEP meeting is coming up, and a lot of her goals are very it's kind of like the slide that you had up that was like which of these two starts with and which one ends with, I don't remember what the ending was, but you know, she knows more than she'll demonstrate in that kind of setting because she just has absolutely no interest in participating in that. So that's why I'm kind of thinking about it. And there's like the home context and then there's the school context. And in school, they have to do things in a way that's like measurable. So I think it's an extra hurdle to figure out how do you measure what she can learn.
Absolutely. And you don't want home to be like all drill and kill anyway. Like, you know, like we want home is home. We want to relax, all of us. But I think about like affirming the language that is being used. Like, oh, you said teddy bear twice. Oh my gosh, 1, 2, twice. Wow. Like, or I heard you say, you know, whatever. It's sort of the affirmation piece of it, right? And the modeling piece that might come from that piece. Oh, where was I going? I also think about like flipping the script and thinking about like having her, to the extent possible, sort of direct you, right? Like, whoa, what word do you want mommy to say funny right now? Oh yeah, pack. Like, you know, I just think about like how can you make it so it's not constantly like you posing a question, them providing an output, you know, that kind of piece. Like, how can you flip it so like they're directing you, they're making, you know, in some ways, hopefully making it fun in some ways, like, oh wait, what do you want? Oh, you want your applesauce? What applesauce? Oh my gosh. You know, thinking about that piece of it too.
Thank you.
No problem.
Well, so much. This is really great. I'm a TVI and I'm working with a student who, although I didn't know it was called onset and rhyme, has shown me that I work a lot with those old cards on a light box, and he really has shown me that he can do the rhyme aspect of small words and the onset aspect of small words. So I think that he is a reader, but he doesn't use his voice. So I am really stumped as a TVI, like how to support the next step, which is to have him actually read, because he's not going to read to me out loud. So I can't tell, the way I would with a child who is going to verbally read me a word, but I'm pretty convinced that he's recognizing and reading words both from, the onset and with rhyme. So I don't know, maybe you have something I could, that I can pursue that'll help me get him to the next level, which is like using that to read words.
Such a great question. So he's non-speaking? Okay. AAC user or no?
He is an AAC user, but I'm not, again, like I'm not a speech therapist. I'm not entirely sure how to incorporate it as I can, but like I'm not sure that he could like navigate around the device and like say each word with the device that I'm presenting to him. Like
Sure.
I'm not sure.
One last question. Does he have some vision or?
Yes.
Okay. I'm thinking about, yeah, you go. I think we'll first there, but then, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I have a resource for you. Penn State has a lot of really great videos that show that next step in a really concrete way. So I will give that to you after. And I think, and I would collaborate with the speech therapist. One, to kind of support him, like does he have yes, no questions, right? Like, does he have his yes, does he have his no? Because that could be a way he's not navigating his entire vocabulary, but he can answer a yes, no question and kind of see what it is that he's recognizing. And kind of, I would really collaborate with the SLP because it does take maybe some of that proactive setting up the environment to support that communication profile to get to that next step. And there are a lot of different ways that we can kind of start doing that, whether that be on his own communication device, or maybe we're introducing more real objects, or there are mid-tech devices where we can pre-program some phrases. And so maybe if yes, no is tough for him, I guess, if we're looking at more specific vocabulary, we can pre-program that and use that as a way for him to respond to. But yeah, I'll definitely give you that resource too, because it was very eye-opening for me to kind of see that.
Because that's really exciting to see, and I just want to know where to go next.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm thinking, literacy should be fun. And I think about like games, like if he seems to have an inclination towards like knowing that initial sound and those end sounds, like, and if he has a predictable or a reliable yes or no sort of system in place in terms of communication, thinking about like, oh, you're sitting on your right. I mean, that's not the case in TVI probably, but like, or you're sitting in a chair right now. Oh my gosh, hair or brush, which one matches? Whether those two words are on the device, whether they're cards that he's tapping, whether they're buttons that are recordable, whether they're, I feel like games. I feel like that's sort of like a nice inset to that, thinking about vocabulary and building upon those particular graphemes, those visual representations of those sounds, and thinking it's a nice assessment. To be honest, I think games can be assessment. Anything can be assessment, but that would be nice. Yeah. Play. Yes.
I think we might have time for one more question. I got the 5-minute whiteboard cue. And I know there are Zoom users, and I apologize, I can't see the chat, but we can always follow up on those questions later too.
Great. Hello. Can people hear me? Great. So I am the children's librarian on campus, and I am, of course, very interested in all of this. Thank you. I was wondering if you could speak more about strategies for reading, and maybe if you have a few examples of books that have fun sounds in them that are kind of your go-tos. Love to hear your thoughts.
I'm going to pass this one to you because you have so many great.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be a long-standing conversation, but we'll make it quick for today. Off the top of my head, no, but I have plenty of sort of stores of things. I think when we're thinking, one piece that I want to mention, if we're thinking about beyond phonological awareness and we're thinking about books, is decodable readers. We didn't touch on that today because that is a piece that is a slightly more advanced skill as we're getting into phonics, as we're getting into reading phrases and sentences and paragraphs and things like that. But have you heard of the term decodables previous to this? Okay, great. So thinking about these controlled texts that have specific sound combinations, yeah, sort of in a trajectory. So when we think about like the old readers of old time, you know, that have like, you know, short words that are maybe all using a word family, the cat sat on a hat, you know, things like that. And then there's a whole trajectory. Decodables have come such a long way. There's 8 zillion publishers, and there's good and bad. And I've got so many things that I can share with you that are free resources, not free resources, that I think that's really an important sort of next step to this. We want kids to be successful. So if we've taught 3-letter sound combination words, we want them to practice with that, right? Like the practice and the repetition is very, very important. So I think about decodables as being the next step. I think about, you know, the rhyming sort of books like the Jake Bakes Cake or things like that, and thinking about the rhyme and onset. And I think also just from a literacy perspective, thinking about, you know, the exposure. Reading to your kids is important, and having kids listen to stories, having them use technology to that piece. It's not the only piece of the puzzle here whatsoever, but I think it is important to expose kids to texts that might be beyond their immediate like sort of reading skill. Yes.
When you're looking at books, marketing is a wild thing and it catches me every time. And one thing to kind of keep in mind when you're because everyone will market their books in whatever way, and there are certain levels. And if they're leveling their books, sometimes that's grounded in a purpose, and sometimes it's really not. There isn't too much of a purpose behind it. And so I would just caution you if there are any like level texts, or looking at, oh, is there a definition of like level A or level 1 means that there are these sounds that we're practicing in the book, like looking at those specific skills that the book is targeting, rather than relying on, oh, text after text A goes to text B, because some programs are really great at that, and some have their own perceptions on kind of where that goes. And so just wanted to speak to that quickly.
I do not believe in reading levels, so.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we're looking at the skill, not the label. Thank you all so much. You've all been amazing. Have a wonderful rest of your day. It was great to see you all, and amazing questions.